Introduction to LADO. Level 1. This is an introduction to the LADO process and roles of all involved. This should be completed by all those that work with children, either as a volunteer or as a paid employee. Level 2 will look into the LADO investigation in more detail in terms of agency roles and potential outcomes. Both modules 1 and 2 should be completed by those that manage, own or recruit to roles where staff work with children. Referrals should be sent to LADO within 24 hours of identifying a concern allegation. The LADO protocol and an electronic referral form can be found on the Sutton website. Please ensure to consider the information on the referral and put down as much information as possible. Essential details are the name, place of employment, date of birth and address, so that police checks can be carried out. Without a place of employment, further inquiries cannot take place. For example, if the information is that the person is a teacher, they could be a teacher in any borough or in any school, and therefore will not be able to be identified. The LADO will always endeavour to respond within a day of your referral. If you have an urgent referral, i.e. sexual harm, physical harm, where forensic evidence is still viable, please call the LADO and email. The possible outcomes from LADO referrals. Advice. This means going back to the agency either to complete an internal investigation or advice around training. ASV meetings, allegations against staff and volunteers, these used to be called senior strategy meetings, and they are a meeting that brings together a police investigation of possible criminal offence, inquiries from Children's Social Services and any employment disciplinary action. Referral to another agency. A complaints investigation, which goes back to the agency to undertake. Initial evaluation meeting, where thresholds are not clear and further information is required to make a decision regarding threshold. And no further action, which means that LADO threshold was not met, or this would be shared as information only. Initial evaluation meetings. All referrals will result in a discussion with LADO, even if they do not meet threshold for an ASV meeting. An initial evaluation meeting is an information sharing meeting where thresholds can only be considered with further information. These meetings will be held if there is a range of information from different sources, someone works at a number of different agencies and roles, a member of public has made a referral which needs further information or delving, and repeated low-level concerns. Initial evaluation meetings are rare in Sutton, however there can be a need for these meetings, and they are not ASV meetings. So the outcome from initial evaluation meetings could be that some tasks are given to the agency to go back and complete and to gather further information, or no further action, or we progress to a strategy meeting, an ASV meeting. Allegations against staff and volunteers meetings, ASVs. An ASV meeting will normally be convened when it has been decided that the threshold of harm and risk has been met. This meeting will decide the strategy for investigating the allegation and bringing the following strands together: police investigations where possible criminal offences occurred, local authority children's social care inquiries or assessments about whether a child is in need of protection or services, consideration by an employer of disciplinary action in relation to possible performance and conduct issues, and also to discuss whether an action is required in regards to person making an allegation should it be considered that the allegation has no foundation and may be malicious. During ASVs, the meeting discussion should decide whether there should be Section 47 inquiries and a police investigation, consider whether any parallel disciplinary processes can take place and agree on protocols for sharing information, consider the current allegation in context of any previous allegations or concerns, where appropriate take account of any entitlement by the staff to use reasonable force if it's in relation to physical harm, consider whether complex abuse investigation is applicable, to plan inquiries if needed, allocate tasks and set timescales, and decide what information can be shared with whom and when. This list is not exhaustive as each case differs in terms of employment contracts, where they work and mitigating circumstances. ASVs were previously called senior strategy meetings. These are on par with strategy meetings held by children's services and are a protected meeting, i.e. minutes cannot be fully shared with the alleged perpetrator and is likely to be redacted. LADO will chair the meetings to ensure good representations, a timely investigation, and this is completed objectively and independently. ASVs do not include the victim or the alleged perpetrator, but can be represented by their employer or their social worker. It is important to be aware that LADOs do not carry out investigations into allegations. Responsibility for the investigation remains with the employer, or whoever is commissioned by the employer to investigate the process, and the police in regards to criminal investigations. The LADO can provide advice and, where necessary, coordinate the process. The LADO is also responsible for ensuring an appropriate outcome is reached. Where it is not straightforward to establish which organisation should lead an investigation, for example, where responsibility may be shared between an employment agency and the organisation where the person is working, the LADO will also provide advice regarding which organisation is best placed to lead the investigation. If an allegation is raised in regards to a professional's personal life where there could be a risk of harm to children in their professional life, the following actions may be required. Approaching the member of staff's employer for further information in order to assess the level of risk, and to invite the employer to a further meeting, discussion about dealing with the possible risks of harm. These meetings will also consider transferable risks. An example of this is if a teacher is being investigated due to accessing child pornography in their personal life, or allegations of supplying drugs or drug use in their personal lives. These would have transferable risks within their professional capacity, whether that is an abnormal interest in children, using drugs whilst on site, or supplying to children. All these would need to be considered within an ASV meeting in order to consider the outcome in relation to personal life matters. Criminal investigations and the role of the police. The police should designate a detective sergeant to liaise with the LADO and their team, take part in meetings and discussions, review the progress of each case in which there is police involvement, share information as appropriate on completion of any investigation or related prosecution. If a police officer receives an allegation about another police officer, they should, without delay, report it to the designated detective sergeant on the child abuse investigation team. The detective sergeant should then immediately inform the LADO. Police work on a different threshold to the management of allegations and social care thresholds. Police work on the remit of beyond reasonable doubt, whereas social care and LADO work on the threshold of probability of balance. We'll discuss what this means in later slides. There may be times when the police complete initial investigation and NFA a case. This does not mean that the probability of balance threshold is not met. Information from the police from their threshold can help the decision-making process around the probability of balance. Social care assessments. If there is a child known as a victim in need of support, or if an alleged perpetrator has their own child, the referral will be sent to CFCS to consider an assessment. Where cases are not allocated already, a duty manager may be asked to attend ASV meetings to represent children's services. In cases of sexual harm and disclosures, a decision may be made at an initial ASV meeting to consider a referral to CFCS, as there is research to suggest children often make disclosures of sexual harm to test whether they will be believed, and it may be in relation to someone else. Child and family assessments, if needed, will consider support for the victim, impact on family, as well as ongoing risk to the child. In the event of a joint investigation with the police, a duty social worker may be asked to arrange a CP medical and to complete a joint visit with the police in order to feed back to the ASV group. The employer's role. Firstly, the employer must decide whether to suspend. Suspension should be considered only in cases where there is cause to suspect a child or children at the place of employment is at risk of harm, or the case is so serious it might be grounds for dismissal. There may be times when initial redeployment might be more useful, and if further information comes to light, suspension can be put in place at a later stage. Suspension is the last resort and should be for the shortest time possible. It is the employer's decision to suspend. LADO can only advise around employment disciplinary. Suspension is a neutral act and will often be paid leave. This does not mean that you are guilty, and it does not mean that you're innocent. Another option is redeployment, so that is asking the staff member to do another role which results in minimal contact with children or where they can be monitored. Supervision could be another option. If ongoing contact with children is necessary, making sure that there's more frequent supervision and monitoring. The disciplinary process. The employer must complete their own disciplinary investigation based on the information shared at ASV meetings. Advice should be sought from HR representatives to ensure that this process is fair, balanced, and in line with thresholds. Outcomes of disciplinary actions could be dismissal, resignation, written warning, verbal warning, imposed training, or redeployment. Dismissal and resignation we'll discuss a bit further, as those result in further actions being taken. Standard of care assessments. The categories of harm are physical, sexual, emotional, and neglect. Often emotional and neglect can be a series of events or incidents that raises concerns about the professional standards of the staff member and the standard of care. In these cases, the agency would be asked to complete a standard of care assessment in line with the minimum standards requirement for the relevant professions. This is then reviewed by the LADO. Standards of care frequently occur for foster carers, childminders, care homes, mostly where children are cared for in a home environment. LADO oversight of standard of care assessments is then recorded within the file. Balance of probability. We've discussed this earlier. The LADO threshold is balance of probability, i.e. more likely to have happened than not. The threshold to which LADO investigations adhere is different to the police thresholds, which is of beyond reasonable doubt. The LADO threshold, along with social care thresholds, is the balance of probability. Therefore, there may be times when police investigations are ongoing. However, disciplinary processes and social care assessments can be substantiated. When considering balance of probability, considerations are given to witnesses, number of victims, impact on child, likelihood of allegation occurring, and any other factors that might be relevant. Within LADO investigations, like civil court, the balance of probability can be considered even if there is no conclusive evidence. The decision is based on the likelihood of this event, i.e. 2 witnesses against 1, motivations, personal life, mitigating factors, and historical concerns. The decisions from ASV meetings. There are 5 possible outcomes: substantiated, unsubstantiated, unfounded, malicious, or false. Substantiated is the only outcome which suggests that on the balance of probability the incident of harm to a child or risk of harm to a child has occurred. In these cases, there is likely to be further action from the employer, such as DBS referrals and referrals to the appropriate regulatory authorities. Reported duties. Safeguarding leads. The designated safeguarding lead must inform their LADO within 1 working day when an allegation is made or prior to any further investigations taking place. A failure to report an allegation in accordance with procedures is a potential disciplinary matter. Child safeguarding. During ASVs, consideration needs to be given to staff members' own family. Referrals should be made to children's services. Sharing information for disciplinary purposes. Wherever possible, police and the local authority children's social care should, during the course of their investigation and inquiries, obtain consent to provide the employer and the regulatory body with statements and evidence for disciplinary purposes. If the police and CPS decide not to charge or decide to administer a caution, or the person is acquitted, the police should pass all relevant information to the employer without delay. If the person is convicted, the police should inform the employer and the LADO straight away so that appropriate action can take place. DBS and regulatory authorities. DBS referrals. There is a legal requirement for employers or organisations to make a referral to DBS where they believe a person has caused harm or poses a risk of harm to vulnerable groups, including children. An employer or volunteer manager is breaking the law if they knowingly employ someone in a regulated activity with a group from which they are barred from working. If an allegation is substantiated, then the guidance regarding making a referral should be followed. The legal duty. The following groups have legal duty to refer information to DBS. Regulated activity suppliers, so these are employers and volunteer managers. Personnel suppliers, so employment agencies, employment businesses, or an educational institution. Referral to a regulatory agency. DBS will refer cases involving teachers to the Teaching Regulatory Authority. Childminders and daycare foster carers, prospective adopters and residential care have a legal duty to report any safeguarding incidents to Ofsted.